Hello, this is Coco from Tarot Geek, and I was going to do a VR called True Self Journey decks, and it's Christine is the original author, and I will link that down below. So the first category is the mystic self, living a stifling life. And I picked the Fantastical Tarot for that. This is a deck I've had for a really long time. And it's a deck that is more than meets the eye. Living in a dream world, many different options of looking at things. And this deck is interesting because it's got some really sweet, lovely things, and then it's got a really dark side where things are harsh. Like this cup is very sweet, and it's got a lot of dragons in it, and then it's got a lot of people in it that are harsh. Like this cup is this Ace of Cups is very sweet, and then like the High Priestess is very stern, but incredibly beautiful. And this was a deck that I worked with quite a bit after I had spent probably 10 years working with the Thoth. And that was kind of one of the early decks that I got and worked with. I didn't really know how to read the RWS system at the time, so I just kind of read it like the Thoth, but I kind of read it intuitively because I loved the way things were depicted in this deck. The next deck is the Freedom Seeking Self, which is running away from the wrong life. And for that, I picked the Wayward Dart Tarot. I probably only had this deck for about 3 years. I actually ended up losing it and not buying a new copy. But this is a very interesting deck, and it's got a lot of depth to it. And it made me see things a little differently when I first got this. And it just made me see tarot a little differently. And it really, for me, represents the seeking freedom and just looking at things differently. You know, that's a interesting card. And the moon in this card is really, really beautiful. Anyway, there's some very beautiful depictions in this deck. And this was a easier deck for me to read. It's black and white, and I don't have a ton of black and white decks, but I do have a few that I really, really like. And the next deck is the Inner Guidance Self, refusing the wrong situations, learning to trust your own voice, potential, ready to trust intuition. And for that, I picked the Crow's Magic Tarot, and it comes in a little case. I have a bunch of versions of this. It comes with a guidebook that's pretty helpful. I think this might now be out of print. But this was a deck that was just refusing. It represents refusing the wrong situations, learning to trust your own voice. And again, it goes its own way a little bit, but it does have some keywords on it, and the guidebook's pretty good. And then it is somewhat Rider-Waite-Smith, but it's a great deck for just like taking you out into a different direction and learning to say, no, I know what's right, I know what's wrong. I am going to go my own way. And this is a great deck for that. learning to trust your own voice, ready to trust intuition. That's what this deck represents to me. And the next prompt is the wild unknown self. Embracing, okay, get this back in. Embracing the liminal and feeling afraid but excited, going into the forest, like learning to see things in a different way. And I have 2 decks for that. One is the Mary L, because this definitely took me down a different path when I got it. A different journey. It doesn't necessarily follow any one system. It's kind of a blend of Thoth, RWS, Marseille, and it definitely goes its own way. It has some Greek myth symbologies in it. And it's a deck that I think I've probably studied maybe 6 different times, different years. And every time I learn something new. It's an amazing deck. It's incredible. And this is the old version. There are some new versions that are borderless, and I think the only thing I've done with this deck is I did cut off the gold edges, but I do have the newer one too, and it's borderless. But this is incredibly deep and definitely representative of just going into the forest. The liminal. And the other deck that I have that represents that for me is a deck that I've only had for about 3 years, called the Pythonic. And it was printed in 2019, like kind of late in 2019. And then I think it went out of print for quite a while. And then it came back into print, I think, in 2021. And I did get a backup copy then. And then it went out of print again. And then it's back in print now, and it's a different version. It's got a box. It's really nice now. But I can't justify getting yet another copy. But this was embracing the liminal. And really learning to look at things differently. And from the time I got this deck, I just really have just spent so much time learning about it. The guidebook's great, and just the images are magical and just beautiful. And it was really helpful for me when we went into the pandemic and things were just upside down and everything was kind of crazy, and this deck was a way of going into a different world and seeing things differently and just looking at the liminal. And it was such a time of change and just doing things differently, and this deck has been at my side ever since, and I just love it. And it's a beautiful deck, and it's just got a lot of depth to it and very interesting. There's also a guidebook or a oracle deck that's more based on gods and goddesses, but love this one. And the next prompt is the wise woman's self, seeking the wise woman, learning to be empowered, but still listening to my guide. And I have 2 decks for this. One of them is the She-Wolf, which I've had for a while. I've had some different versions of this. This is my favorite version. Learning to be empowered, but still listening to your guide. And this is a very feminine deck, and it is really helpful in like finding your way. And it is a deck that is about female empowerment and learning to find the way through. And it's just beautiful. It's a good deck to use for intuition. And it is very special. And I just really love this deck. And I never would want to be without it. And I never get tired of it, no matter how many times I use it. It is in my main rotation at all times. And just really wonderful. And I'm sure you've seen this a bunch, but it is a very special deck. And the other one I picked was the Lioness Oracle, because it is also a deck that is about empowerment, and seeing things different, and listening to your guide, finding your own way. And it's very cosmic feeling and just stunning. I couldn't believe it when I saw this deck, and I just fell in love with it and have used it pretty regularly ever since. It is just a very special deck and just incredibly beautiful. And it's not perfect and it's collage, but it is just unique and just cool. And I really, really love it. Very fun deck. Okay. And the next prompt is the Deep Learning Self, Lessons from the Wise Woman. And it is about how you integrated what you learned into your practice. And for that, I have the Barbara Walker. I do have different versions of this deck. This is one of the early versions. I also had a promo copy, and then this is the deck that's in print now. It's Tarot in a Tin. And this, for me, is about integrating what I learned into practice. And it was a deck that I had early on, more than 20 years ago. And it was, I had mostly just used the Thoth, and I got this about the same time I got the Fantastical Tarot, maybe a little before, and it just changed everything and how I saw everything. It has a pretty great guidebook that's with it too. And I think that might be separate now. I think, yeah, now it comes with just a little book, but some of the imagery is a little harsh, but it was a deck that for me, I couldn't hide from things. I had to integrate everything I learned and work with things. This card was always like kind of intense. But it really helped change my practice and how I saw things at the time. And it is a deck that I still use frequently. Still love it just as much as the day I got it. And that's saying something, because a lot of decks you get tired of, but never ever got tired of this deck. And the next prompt is the Reclaim Self, Returning from the Forest. Oops, I felt the noise there. And that's all about just like you went through everything, you've learned a lot, and taking away lessons and being able to integrate them into your regular life. And for that, oops, sorry, I have the Tarot of Delphi, because this has so much depth to it. And for me, I think that it was the time that I got it. I've had it for a number of years. The stories and learning about the stories, and I knew quite a bit about the Greek stories already, just from childhood, and my parents read those to me, and then I took a lot when I was first in college. But this deck is so much about integration of everything in life and looking at bigger picture and consequences and just how we like live on a day-to-day basis and the consequences of what we do, and looking at our place compared to where we are in history. And it just, I think it partly was the time I got this deck, but it just, I'm still blown away by it. I love it, and it has so much meaning. I do not have a backup of this one, and I wish I had got one. Hopefully nothing ever happens to it, because it is out of print now. And I did make a journal and went through all the stories and went into more depth about a lot of the stories. And when I am really wanting to know something really important in my life, a lot of times I just go to this deck because it has so much depth to it. Okay. And then the next deck is, or the next prompt is when I made up, kind of returning home, everything feels normal again, kind of more the everyday, after you feel fully empowered. And that is, sorry, I should have showed you, that's the front, the Invisible Light Tarot. And I think you can still get this deck, but I think it's expensive. But this is a deck that just feels like every day to me, but also just feels normal and feels like everyday life and returning home and integrating everything into my life, but in a more mundane way than the fully empowered self is. And this deck is a photographic deck, but it is so much about how seeing things in different lights changes the way you view things. And it is probably the deck I use the very most in 2022, even though I've had this deck for a really long time. It just is like something that is just resonating so deeply with me right now. And I love the colors. I love the black and white. I love how everything is depicted, and I love the way everything was photographed. It's just very special and very unique, and there's really nothing like it. I love that picture of the star. Just absolutely love it, and used it almost every single month this year for my personal readings, and took it everywhere I went. So very special deck. And that is it. And I will link Christine's tag down below. Thanks for watching.